John Bolton's a guy who's well known for being wrong about, well, everything. He supported the Vietnam War, he lied about weapons of mass destruction in Iraq, he was a lawyer in Buckley v. Vallejo, allowing the Supreme Court to strike down campaign finance laws, and he's never met a war that he didn't like. So let's see what foreign policy expert John Bolton has to say about Ukraine now.
One of the red lines that this administration has had, and our allies, is that Ukraine is not a NATO country and is not entitled to Article 5 protection or treaty protection, and that the U.S. will not send troops in to rescue Americans. There are several thousand Americans still in Ukraine. Do you think that U.S. forces should actually go in to defend Ukraine?
But the issue, as in all issues like this, is would a Russian invasion and takeover of Ukraine adversely affect American national security and that of its NATO allies? The answer to that's absolutely yes. You can have an influence, a negative influence on our security, even if you're not a NATO ally. And we did not act appropriately early. I think we should have had more American forces in Ukraine, not to fight the Russians, but to train with the Ukrainians. Biden took that off the table, saying there would be no American forces involved, and he got nothing for it.
See, this might be a stopped clock moment where John Bolton is correct, but only twice a day and for the wrong reasons. The reason we should have had American troops in Ukraine has nothing to do with American national security interests. The American national security is pretty safe. There's no reason Russia would want to declare on us because we have nukes. Now, national security can be talked about in terms of economic security. For example, if you're a landlocked country, you probably rely on other countries surrounding you for trade, so those countries have a lot of leverage on you, and that could compromise national security. Obviously, Ukraine has pretty bad national security because they're being invaded right now, and the real reason, no matter what anybody tells you, that Russia wants to invade Ukraine is because Ukraine has large reserves of natural gas. Russia's economy is not doing too well right now and nobody likes them, so they don't have the economic or diplomatic means of extracting that natural gas from Ukraine, so they can only rely on their military to seize it. The reason we would want American troops in Ukraine is humanitarian, as in Ukraine is partially at least a democracy and Russia is not. The reason we have troops on the ground is for the same reason that we have military bases established all over the world in many different countries. People will not attack America or American troops because they know they cannot go head to head with America. And the same goes with Ukraine and Russia. With American troops in Ukraine, Russia dare not invade. We've already seen that Russia invading Ukraine has been an optics failure. It's been a defeat economically, clearly, and they cannot afford a military failure as well. If Russia is in any way rational, they would have stood down at that point.
But that's the point, isn't it? We don't know if Putin is rational at this point.
Yes, we do. We know that he's rational enough, as in he does not want to die. Russia will never beat America in a head-to-head military conflict. You could escalate to nukes, but then everybody dies. Unless he's so irrational he doesn't even care about his own life, this is an example of madman theory. Madman theory is the idea if you act insane and unpredictable, people will be more likely to be careful around you and allow you to extract extra concessions from them. I am willing to call Putin's bluff because I think he is bluffing. Another possible objection is a comparison to our fuckery in Iraq and Afghanistan, where continued American military presence could destabilize the region and cause the population to resent America, leading to endless conflict. Importantly though, these regions weren't democratic before we entered, and certainly not friendly to American interests. Ukraine, however, is actively seeking NATO membership and would be glad to have America's support. American efforts to liberalize foreign countries by force have had mixed to bad results, but Ukraine is already a democracy, and faced with total fascist takeover, let's just say things couldn't get much worse. I guess maybe Russia's population could be resentful of America, though even that might not be true at this point. But between saving a democracy in Ukraine and keeping the Russian people happy with us, I'd say get fucked, stay mad. The final objection is a comparison to the Cuban Missile Crisis, where Russia unexpectedly bringing nuclear-armed missiles to Cuba nearly caused nukes to be exchanged. This is frankly a pretty shitty argument considering the overwhelming differences. The argument that American troop presence is an escalation likely to cause nuclear war is pure conjecture. Russia has already declared that economic sanctions and weapons aid constitute an act of war, and nothing's happened to us yet. Besides, there's a critical difference between Russia placing nukes in Cuba aimed at the United States and America putting defensive troops in Ukraine. During the Cold War, missiles were on a hair trigger, meant to reactively blast the opposing mainland at a moment's notice. The Cuban Missile Crisis was caused by weapons designed explicitly for a counter-offensive purpose. Troops at the border, on the other hand, can be positioned quite defensively. The types of equipment and infrastructure being built was a clear indication that Russia planned to invade, and American troops could be defensively focused. The chances of a false alarm triggering nuclear war are vanishingly small compared to Cuban brinksmanship. Even if it came to nuclear conflict, there's not a guarantee of annihilation. Russia obviously would not nuke Ukraine just to annex its ashes, and it wouldn't be able to disable all of America's nukes with an all-out blitz. There's no way Russia would be able to survive a retaliatory strike if it truly threatened America. Russia's best plan of attack would be to bomb a remote area like Alaska, absorb a retaliatory hit from America, and hope America would go, "Fuck this, Ukraine isn't worth as much to us as it is to you, I'm out." And remember, all of this is also very unlikely. Many people in the appeasement left and populist right will try to convince you that American troops in Ukraine is a pro-war position, but clearly war has happened despite their preferred policy being enacted. In the overall outlook of escalation versus appeasement, it seems like the benefits to American presence in Ukraine far outweigh the drawbacks, especially since a successful Russian invasion could encourage China to set its sights on Taiwan. I generally think America's military should be much smaller than it currently is, but since we've got it here, maybe we could use it for good for a change. Obviously, none of this counterfactual can actually be verified, so in the wise words of John Bolton,
Well, I think it's probably too late for that now.
I'm and I approve this message.